For years, the so-called lab leak hypothesis was labeled by top public health officials as a conspiracy theory, or at least a fringe idea. But a senior officer inside the Central Intelligence Agency, subpoenaed by the Senate Homeland Security Committee, says it was always the prevailing theory in the intelligence community, but their analysis was buried or even rewritten.
Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident.
He says they instead pushed the natural origins, or zoonotic theory, suggesting it started in an animal, possibly in a seafood market, detailed in this now infamous research paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, which also stated multiple times, quote, "We do not believe that any type of laboratory-based scenario is plausible." James Erdman III says intelligence officers who disagreed were retaliated against, in part because of the role of Dr. Anthony Fauci. Homeland Security Chairman Rand Paul has for years argued Dr. Fauci played a leading role in approving gain-of-function research being carried out at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China.
How can Anthony Fauci objectively comment on a discussion of COVID origins when he approved the very funding that may have caused the pandemic virus?
Attempts by the World Health Organization to investigate were met with severe restrictions by China. Senator Paul insisting U.S. officials also played a major role in the cover-up.
After millions died, children lost years of learning, small businesses were destroyed, civil liberties were restricted, and dissenting Americans were censored and smeared, the government owes its people the evidence.
Just days after President Trump returned to office in 2025, the CIA did assess that COVID-19 most likely originated in a lab. But a spokesperson criticized James Erdman's testimony before lawmakers, calling it, quote, dishonest political theater, masquerading as a congressional hearing.
That agent coming forward as a whistleblower, claiming the agency played a role in covering up the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this hearing is being pushed forward and pushed primarily by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, who has long questioned the origins of the pandemic. Rand Paul has been one of the loudest voices on Capitol Hill to prosecute Dr. Anthony Fauci, who led the COVID-19 response.
We know there are other charges besides just lying to Congress. There's destroying records, there's telling others to destroy records, and then there's also the potential, as you said, of a conspiracy charge. So I think charges still actually loom.
Now, if the committee finds Fauci of any wrongdoing, it's going to be some problems or issues to prosecute him, though. Here's why. You'll remember he did receive a pardon from Joe Biden as he was headed out of the office in the final few days of his administration.
The COVID vaccine was long attributed as one of President Trump's main accolades during his first term, but throughout his second, the vaccine has been criticized. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and there have been multiple reports, Emma, that the FDA might issue a black box warning on that vaccine. Through the FDA commissioner denied this. What do we know at this point? Is this all still speculation?
Yeah, so at this point, all still internal speculation coming from an internal source. And according to CNN, citing people who are familiar with these internal FDA discussions, the agency is exploring whether to add a black box warning to COVID-19 vaccines, but that would be actually the strongest warning the FDA can put on a medical product that's typically reserved for things like risks linked to death or serious injury. But it's important to say very clearly the FDA commissioner actually denied these recent reports in an interview with Bloomberg, who said that they have no plans to issue this warning. But the FDA did launch an investigation into possible links between COVID-19 vaccines and also deaths a few weeks ago.
Well, as you highlighted, I mean, even just considering a black box warning, that's a big deal. Who's driving this discussion? Do we know inside the FDA?
So CNN reports that the push is really being led by Dr. Vinay Prasad, who's the FDA's chief medical and scientific officer and head of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, which is the division that oversees vaccines. So Prasad recently circulated an internal memo claiming that FDA staff identified at least 10 pediatric deaths allegedly linked to COVID vaccinations, but no data has been publicly released to support that claim.
All right, Emma, thank you. Later
Thanks.
on, Emma will join us to dig into the process of black box warnings and how the FDA issues them.
The FDA is now preparing to place their most serious warning on COVID-19 vaccinations. This is according to CNN. The outlet says their sources, however, would not confirm if this was for all vaccinations or just the mRNA shots. CNN also says the plan is not officially confirmed and it could change. Now, it's not clear if this report is related, but earlier this week, researchers at Stanford University found a connection between mRNA-based COVID vaccines and an increased rate of myocarditis, inflammation of heart tissue, especially in men under the age of 30. Now, according to the study, in a two-shot sequence, myocarditis occurred in about 1 in 140,000 after one shot, then 1 in 32,000 after the second. But in males under 30, the number rose to 1 in 17,000. Researchers said in most cases, symptoms were treatable and patients recovered fully.
The deputy district director to an Illinois congressman is now facing wire fraud charges. Gerard Murr, who serves under Representative Danny Davis, was indicted this week for allegedly fraudulently obtaining COVID relief benefits. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, joins us. And Jeff, in this indictment, which was unsealed this week, Murr is accused of continuing this fraud scheme for over a year. Break down the details.
So Murr is accused of filing a fraudulent application for pandemic unemployment assistance benefits back in 2020, claiming to be unemployed due to COVID-19. Then for 16 months, he allegedly submitted similar fraudulent applications, raking in over $31,000. But the indictment reads Murr knew that he was in fact employed by the federal government, serving as an aide to Democrat Illinois Congressman Danny Davis at the time, where, according to Legistorm, he's been working since 2008, first as a constituent services representative before being hired as a district deputy director in 2013. Murr now facing 3 counts of wire fraud, each of which is punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison. In response to these charges, the Labor Department's Inspector General, Anthony D'Esposito, who helped announce this indictment, writing on X, quote, stealing pandemic unemployment benefits while collecting a government paycheck. Exactly why Vice President J.D. Vance's task force to eliminate fraud exists. While both Davis and Murr have not yet publicly addressed the claims, Davis, who's 84 years old, previously announced that he isn't seeking re-election and will be retiring from Congress at the end of his current term. That's next year. Murr did run as a Democrat for the Illinois House 10th District back in 2020, but did lose in the primary. According to the indictment, his arraignment in federal court is scheduled for May 14th.
Former senior official at the National Institutes of Health has been indicted for allegedly concealing federal records during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Justice Department recently unsealing that indictment, charging David Morin's with 5 felony counts. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, joins us, and those counts include conspiracy charges, destruction or falsification of records, plus a kickback scheme. Tell us more.
So the accusations against Morin's in large part have to do with his email, specifically moving government conversations related to the COVID-19 pandemic to his private Gmail account to avoid public disclosure, plus skirt the Freedom of Information Act from those seeking answers about gain-of-function research. The Justice Department announcing this week David Morin's, a former top aide to Dr. Anthony Fauci at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, is now facing charges over an alleged scheme to hide federal records during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, prosecutors allege that Morin's and 2 unnamed unindicted co-conspirators worked together to defraud the U.S. by shielding those records from the public, using his personal Gmail to exchange emails about the pandemic, the back coronavirus grant, requests for documents about that grant, and the origins of COVID-19. The indictment coming less than 2 years after Senator Ron Johnson and his team helped uncover emails from Morin's, eventually leading to the disclosure of this one from 2021, which reads in part, quote, I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I'm FOIA'd.
People are emailing me on the subject. Don't email to my official account, email to my Gmail account.
Those emails, the center of a COVID Select subcommittee hearing in 2024, where Morin's was asked directly about his actions.
Did you ever delete or attempt to delete a federal record?
No, but let me explain why it seems to be discrepant. You can't delete an email from NIH, from an NIH computer system.
The indictment also reviving calls for the DOJ to prosecute Fauci himself. May 11th serving as the deadline to file an indictment for denying under oath that he funded gain-of-function experiments that modified bat coronaviruses. Fauci and Senator Rand Paul sparring on the topic multiple times.
Do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
The NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research.
Former U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, John Fishwick, telling the National News Desk, when it comes to Morin's, it looks like an open and shut case.
He deliberately, in those emails, said, he was moving things away to avoid a FOIA request.
But trying to indict Fauci may be a little tougher, since he received a preemptive pardon before former President Biden left office.
DOJ would have a hurdle to say, that Fauci knew about this and was part of this.
Now, if no plea deal is reached, the case will likely go to trial. If convicted, Morin's faces significant prison time, up to 5 years for conspiracy and up to 20 years for each count of destroying or altering records. Reporting for the National News Desk, I'm Jeff Harris.